The air in Lagos was thick with the smell of exhaust fumes, fried plantains, and dust. It clung to the skin like a second layer, mixing with sweat and the sharp tang of the open gutters that ran along the cracked roads. In that chaos, where buses honked like angry beasts and traders shouted prices loud enough to cut through the noise, lived a girl named Amara. At 13, her body was thin like bamboo, her shoulders hunched from the weight of survival. Her hair was uncombed, her clothes faded until the original color was a mystery, and her bare feet were hardened from years of walking on hot asphalt. She carried herself with the quiet alertness of someone who had long ago learned the streets had no sympathy, only rules, and those rules belonged to the strongest. Her mother, Ngozi, was sitting beside a rusted drain that morning, tracing circles in the dust with her fingers and humming a song no one else could hear. The hem of her wrapper was stained with mud, and her eyes had the faraway look of someone staring at a world invisible to others. Amara adjusted the wrapper around her mother's shoulders. "Mama, the sun is hot. Let's sit under the tree," she murmured, but Ngozi shook her head, her gaze fixed on a point in the road where nothing stood. To most passers-by, she was just another madwoman, and Amara, just the daughter of madness. People stepped around them, some wrinkling their noses, others muttering insults as though poverty was contagious. Amara's earliest memories weren't of home-cooked meals or bedtime stories, but of her mother's sudden outbursts, screaming at strangers, running from shadows, laughing at nothing in the middle of the night. On rare days, when a kind of fragile clarity returned to her, Ngozi would braid Amara's hair and hum an old Igbo lullaby about a child destined for greatness. Those moments were like drops of clean water in a desert, precious, but gone too soon. Most days, Amara was the mother, guiding Ngozi away from the edge of traffic, coaxing her to eat, and shielding her from cruel hands and harsher words. Every morning, Amara found herself drawn to the gates of St. Gabriel's School. The walls were painted white, though the city dust had dimmed their brightness, and behind them children in uniforms walked in neat lines, their shoes polished, their laughter carefree. She would stand outside, listening to the rhythm of lessons drifting from open windows, mathematics, English, science, each word a spark in her mind. Sometimes she would crouch by the side wall, peering through a gap to watch the teacher's chalk dance across the blackboard. She mouthed the answers silently, careful not to be noticed, because she knew what would happen if she was. The last time she had been caught, the guard had grabbed her arm so hard it left a bruise for days and warned her never to come back. Hunger was a constant companion, curling in her belly until it became almost normal. But the hunger for learning was worse. She had tasted school once, years ago, when a neighbor had paid her fees for a single term. It had been enough to teach her the alphabet, basic sums, and the intoxicating feeling of knowing something new. But when that neighbor moved away, the door to education closed again, and Amara had been left pressing her face to windows instead of sitting behind a desk. One afternoon, while her mother sat in a quiet stupor, Amara wandered near the corner where a small food stall stood. The woman behind it, broad-shouldered and warm-eyed, was arranging fried plantains in a tray. She noticed the thin girl hovering nearby and asked, "Hungry?" Amara hesitated, unsure if it was a trick, but the woman, who introduced herself as Mama Ruth, simply handed her a plate with 2 plantains and a spoonful of beans. "Eat," she said, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. That meal felt like a festival in Amara's mouth, the sweetness of the plantain mixing with the savory beans, filling her belly for the first time in days. From that day, Mama Ruth became a quiet anchor in her life. She didn't give much. Her own earnings were modest, but sometimes she would let Amara sit under the shade of her umbrella, or hand her leftover bread at the end of the day. One afternoon, Mama Ruth caught her drawing numbers in the dust with a stick. "Who taught you that?" she asked. Amara explained how she listened to school lessons through windows and practiced them alone. Mama Ruth's lips curved into a small smile, and the next day she brought a battered notebook and a pencil stub. "Your mind is a gift," she said. Don't let it rust. Amara guarded the notebook like treasure, hiding it under her shirt at night to protect it from rain. She filled its pages with shaky letters, copied sums she remembered, and even made up her own questions to solve. But the streets were always ready to take back anything they gave. One rainy week, Mama Ruth told her she was leaving Lagos to live with her daughter in Port Harcourt. I told the new stall owner about you, but I can't promise she'll help, she admitted. A week later, Mama Ruth was gone, and the new woman chased Amara away the first time she tried to sit under the umbrella. With Mama Ruth gone, Amara turned back to the schools. She became a shadow, moving from one to another, listening through fences, crouching by windows, memorizing whatever she could before someone noticed. But the danger grew with each attempt. Guards chased her, older boys threw stones, and insults rained down on her like the afternoon storms. Mad girl's daughter, witch child, gutter rat. She learned to keep her face still when they said it, though inside the words dug deep. In the market, she tried to earn a few naira selling sachets of water. The tray was heavy, her bare feet burned against the pavement, and the competition was merciless. Older sellers pushed her out of the way, bus conductors yelled at her to move, and one afternoon, after hours of work, a teenage boy snatched the coins from her tray and disappeared into the crowd. That night, she lay beside her mother, who was humming to herself, and stared at the dark sky, wondering if life would ever be more than this. Then, one day, she met Adiz. The girl was her age, with neatly braided hair and shoes so shiny they reflected the sunlight. She saw Amara lingering by the school gate and, instead of walking past, stopped to ask, "Why are you always here?" Amara answered simply, "I want to learn." Adiz looked curious. "Teach me something, then." Amara picked up a stick and wrote her own name in the dust. "I can show you how to write yours." That was the beginning of their secret friendship. Adiz began sneaking out during lunch breaks to meet Amara by the gate. Sometimes she brought her bread, sometimes old worksheets from class. Amara devoured them, memorizing everything and teaching Adiz tricks to remember her lessons. Soon, Adiz's grades improved, and she told her parents about the barefoot girl who was her secret teacher. One afternoon, Adiz's father, Mr. Okonkwo, came to see for himself. He found his daughter bent over a paper while a thin, barefoot girl corrected her handwriting. His face darkened. "Who is this?" he demanded. Adiz explained, but he cut her off. "Go inside." Turning to Amara, he said, "You don't belong here. Leave before I call the guard." Amara picked up her notebook and walked away without a word, the weight in her chest heavier than the water trays she carried in the market. But Adiz didn't give up. She argued with her father, insisting that Amara was more than just some street girl. Finally, perhaps out of guilt or curiosity, he agreed to test her. Sitting in his air-conditioned living room, Amara answered every question he asked: math, spelling, even geography. When she finished, he was silent for a moment before saying, "You're wasted out there." A week later, Mr. Okonkwo paid her fees at a modest public school, bought her a uniform, and handed her a pair of black shoes. It wasn't the Golden Gated Academy, but it was a classroom with a desk and a teacher who called her by name. Every day she arrived early, her notebooks filled with careful handwriting, determined to prove that his trust was not misplaced. She still sold water after school, still guarded her mother from the cruelty of the streets, and still endured whispers from classmates about her worn bag and patched clothes. But each insult was only fuel. At night, she would open her notebook under the dim light of a street lamp and whisper Mama Ruth's words to herself, "Don't let your mind rust." And she never did.